They built New York's subway not as a clean civic project, but as a machine running on the bones and sweat of immigrants, of the poor, of men shoved into dark shafts for small pay and high risk. When you ride the subway today, you ride above tunnels dug by men who didn't always come back. You ride above compounds of corruption, shortcuts, political deals, and human cost. The grand promise was progress, speed, modernity, but underneath, the cost was lives, injuries, and exploitation. This is how the underground city was carved. The earliest method used was called cut and cover. That meant ripping up whole city streets, swinging open trenches, blasting rock, laying tunnel ribs, and then covering it back. It destroyed neighborhoods as it went. Buildings cracked, foundations shifted, people displaced. In its push to build fast and cheap, contractors often cut corners on safety. Wages were low, hours were long, and workers, many recent immigrants from Ireland, Italy, Eastern Europe, saw the subway as a chance, even though it was dangerous. The machinery was crude by modern standards: pickaxes, shovels, horse carts, explosives placed by hand, and every time they blasted rock under existing streets, there was risk. One of the darker episodes came during early construction when a dynamite explosion killed 6 people, including a man asleep in his bed in an adjacent building. That kind of collateral damage was a known hazard: houses above the new tunnels shifting or cracking, walls collapsing. Around that same period, one of the engineers inspecting the work was crushed by falling boulders while walking his route. Death wasn't rare, it was part of the work. These are incidents rarely in the public memory, but they were part of routine risk in those early days. Contracting itself was opaque and rife with favoritism. The main line's work was parceled into multiple subcontracts, firms competing to cut costs, and with that, cutting margins on safety. The evidence from records shows that many of the men doing the tunneling, the boring, the shoring up of rock were working under severe conditions: cramped timber supports, inadequate ventilation, exposure to gas and dust, shifting soils. The official photos and reports made it look like progress. The reality underground was damp, dangerous, and deadly. Even after the tunnels were done, operation was not free of risk. The system's deadliest single event remains the Malbone Street wreck of 1918, when a train on the Brighton line in Brooklyn derailed in a sharply curved tunnel. The motorman was inexperienced. He'd been pressed into service during a labor strike and entered the curve at speeds far above safe limits. The crash killed nearly 100 people and injured hundreds more. That disaster exposed systemic negligence, wooden cars, inadequate safety devices, and poor oversight. It became a grim emblem of what happens when expansion outpaces safety. Across years, accidents piled up. Trains derailed, cars hit tunnel walls, switches failed, faulty track work collapsed under stress. Because subway service is continuous and underground, even small errors could trigger catastrophic damage. Some deaths were from electrocution by the third rail. Others were incidents where passengers were pushed or fell onto tracks. Over time, the system responded with stronger safety protocols, signal systems, and later automation. But those early years were steeped in risk. Beyond physical danger, there was exploitation in labor practices. Workers were often immigrants who accepted dangerous jobs because they had few alternatives. They were underpaid, lacked strong labor protections, and often lived in boarding houses or slums. When a worker was injured, or worse, killed, the compensation was minimal or non-existent. Contractors and city officials rarely faced accountability. The risks were part of the price of progress. Tens of thousands of laborers rotated through the subway project, working day and night, with no promise of lasting security, and politics was always involved. Subway construction was a way for political machines to reward contractors, line up patronage jobs, and funnel public funds. Official corruption meant oversight was uneven. When accidents happened, investigations were sometimes superficial, blame was shifted, and reforms delayed. The city and state governments pushed forward construction because the promise of economic growth, real estate development, and transit access was too valuable and too profitable to stop. In the neighborhoods above, residents felt the impact too: vibrations from blasting cracked walls. Some structures sank, In Lower Manhattan, cut and cover ripped up entire streets. Merchants lost business as sidewalks were destroyed for months. Families were displaced, their homes unstable or condemned. The brunt of the suffering fell on poor neighborhoods, not on the wealthy who celebrated the subway's arrival at grand stations. Slowly, reforms emerged. After disasters like Malbone, safety measures were tightened. Stronger car construction, better signaling, stricter training for motormen. Over decades, the subway grew safer, but those reforms were written in blood. The history of the subway is not just an engineering triumph, it's also a ledger of human cost and compromise. So the next time you descend into a station, take a look at the walls, listen to the hum of the tunnels, and remember, the rails under your feet were laid by hands that bled. The subway was built on death and exploitation as much as innovation. It carries millions now, but it rides above a buried graveyard of effort, sacrifice, and lives lost.